A.E.Housman's poem, When I Was 1 and 20, is a dramatic monologue written in the form of a Scottish lyric ballad. The poem consists of two stanzas of 8 lines each. All of the even numbered lines contain end rhymes, and none of the odd numbered lines rhyme. The end rhymes in the poem are considered perfect or full rhymes because after their differing consonants they contain identical accented vowel sounds such as say and away. The poem also contains some near rhymes within individual lines of the poem. Let's see the summary of the poem. In the opening lines, the speaker begins his monologue by clearly expressing that at the age of 21, he was warned by a wise man not to give his heart away. Notice that the remembered warning is in the form of a quote rather than a paraphrase, which makes the poem's imagery and emotions more immediate. A wise person can be thought to be one who has already experienced the pain of a lost or unrequited love. Here, the wise person, who we assume in his wisdom, also knows the value of financial stability and attraction of money, has warned the young speaker of the poem that being poor is better than suffering the pain and despair of lost love, of living after having given your very heart away. The images of the currency become a concrete manifestation of the contrast between things of the heart and things of the world. The inherent message in the warning is that though you need money to buy food and shelter, it would be better to go without these necessities that keep us alive than to suffer in love. The speaker continues to quote the wise man exactly, remembering that he had warned the speaker to go even beyond giving away the standard monetary currency of crowns, pounds, and guineas to give precious gems away, such as pearls and rubies, rather than allow his fancy or love to be restricted. This suggests that the heart is more precious than gems and ought to be guarded even more carefully. Use of the images of pearls and rubies intensifies the emotional impact of the remembered warning, expressed through the images of the crowns, pounds, and guineas of the previous lines. The speaker then admits that when he was 21, he was not in the habit of listening to or heeding lessons attempting to be taught by someone of experience. There is an implication here that youth not listening to those older or wiser is a universally understood concept. The speaker tells us that he was warned more than once. Here, Housman uses the word paid in line 13 to continue the imagery of monetary currency and gems in the previous stanza. The impact that this has, perhaps, is to make us feel even more intensely that there is always an exchange in life, that one can never get something for nothing. In this instance, the price for giving up fancy and the heart will be endless rue or sorrow. The new quotation marks at the beginning of line 11 and the end of line 14 serve to magnify how exactly the speaker remembers the second warning as well. By the end of the poem, we realize this quotation has probably had the effect of taking us more directly into the speaker's agony by hearing the words even as he has gone over them in his rue. In the final lines of the poem, Housman completes the speaker's monologue in a simply and clearly expressed agreement with the wise man's warnings. Just 1 year older and apparently now experienced in the pain of lost or unrequited love, he simply states it is true. However, he begins his expression with the word "oh" and repeats the phrase "it is true," which suggests the intensity of the "oh" and sorrow felt, while continuing the poem's musicality. Here, the conciseness and simplicity of expression allow us, perhaps, to feel even more severely the impact of the warnings contained above. The speaker of this poem admits that he did not or could not follow the advice given to him when he was 21, even though it came from a wise man. There are two possible reasons for this failure to act. The first is that he did not recognize the wisdom of the wise man until he turned 22 and through experience came to see the wisdom of his advice. The other possibility is that the poem speaker did realize that it was good advice at the time but was helpless to do anything about it because he was too young. When he had matured, it was as if a spell had been broken and he realized the wisdom of the man's words. Both of these ways of looking at the phrase, a wise man, illustrate the same thing about knowledge, that it can only be absorbed when one is ready for it. But each one implies a slightly different lesson about this particular character. The poem subtly draws the line between knowledge that is told by someone else and knowledge that is gained from experience, showing readers that experiential knowledge is the only kind that matters. Another issue that is left to interpretation is whether ignoring wise advice and only drawing from experience is meant to represent the human condition, as the poem's lofty tone implies, or if it is only a condition of youth. The poem also conveys the message that a person in love is not free, that one must avoid giving their heart to another in order to keep their fancy free. Money, it tells us, makes no such claim on personal freedom. The advice to give crowns and pounds and guineas away contradicts common knowledge, which dictates the acquiring wealth gives a person the means with which to pursue happiness. Hausman tells us through the persona of the wise man that acquired wealth has nothing to do with freedom and therefore does not affect happiness. Falling in love, on the other hand, does take one's freedom and therefore leaves a person in misery or endless ruin. There is some historical precedent to his view of love, since the idea of giving away one's heart is a common way of speaking of love. The poem never says whether its speaker is successful in love, whether the person he has given his heart to loves him back, which leaves readers to assume that any sort of love will be paid with sighs aplenty, presumably because any person who is in love is not free. The readers are told that something has happened to the speaker of this poem between the ages of 21 and 22 to make him realize that the wise man's advice about love was true. The new attitude is not presented as being a misstep or as a temporary response to a situation. It is presented as the truth. The person in the poem is meant to have matured from ignorance to understanding in 1 year. Why, at the end of the poem, does he reflect on the wise man's word with, "It is true, it is true"? Age alone might be the cause. The poem might be saying that within the year between 21 and 22, truth makes itself known. More likely, though, this poem wants us to believe that something happened in the intervening year to change the speaker's perspective. The poem does not describe such an event, but it is unlikely that the sort of bitter disappointment described here could occur by itself spontaneously. This seems like more of an absolute truth than a response to just one bad relationship. If the new understanding is true, and if most people come to this understanding as they age, then going through the experience can fairly be called a rite of passage.